It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
One of the coolest things about having my own podcast is that when I read a book that I really like, I can reach out to the author of that book, and more often than not, I mean, not every time, but more often than not, they say, hey, so glad you like the book. Let's chat. And so today I'm talking with two authors, both who have written books about raising neurodivergent kids, and both books just really spoke to me. They sang to my soul. The first book that we're going to talk about is called Square Me, Round World. Square Me, Round World. Obviously riffing off the idea that there's square pegs and round holes. The author of the book is Chelsea Luca. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, but for writing this fantastic book. Tell me about the book. For people who have no idea what Square Me Round World is really about, what's the deal?
Thank you so much for having on your show. It's just an absolute joy. I could talk about my book all day. So Square Me Round World came about, rather impulsively, as sometimes the best ideas do, when I wrote a short story for one of my children in relation to neurodivergent friendships and how they can look really different to what we see as the stereotypical friendships. And it very quickly escalated to 7 short stories, all of which were actually written on the notes application of my mobile phone, mostly at midnight.
Wow.
And so I shared those stories with a few friends, and they were all saying, these are so amazing. These give some really beautiful insights into, what life is like for people when they, live in a world that doesn't really feel like it fits them very well. So I had a few people encouraging me to publish it, and I denied, and then impulsively decided, of course, I was going to publish it, and it was going to be a fantastic book, and got all these amazing people on board, like the beautiful illustrator Eliza Fricker, absolutely made the book as well. Her illustrations are perfection. And so what came out of it was a collection of short stories which kind of describe a bunch of different elements of what life can feel like when you're somebody that is growing up in a world that doesn't feel like it was essentially made for you.
I remember reading that friendship story and just the way the kids either got each other or didn't get each other. I love the story about Rosie putting on her mask every day as she goes to school and then coming home and taking it off, but then not being able to. Every time I read a story, I kind of got those, when you get goosebumps on your arms, you sort of get those chills because you just know that this resonates. There are people who are going through this every single day. It touched every part of, I think, what's important. What's your background, Chelsea? You mentioned you've got kids. Tell me a bit more about that.
I'm a late identified autistic ADHD psychologist. I have 2 neurodivergent children, and I also have supported autistic and ADHD clients in my private practice, for coming up, I think, almost close to 10 years now. So I kind of say I've got the trifecta in terms of having a bunch of different insights into autistic and ADHD life. And so I think that that's really, made it possible for me to be able to provide a bunch of different insights into different experiences, because obviously every autistic person is not the same. Every ADHD is not the same. People's experiences are so diverse. So, I really tried to draw on my own personal experience and, what I really would have liked to have read when I was, little me and not really going, I don't know how this whole world thing works. It's a bit strange. And then, obviously some of these concepts I've been explaining to my children along the way. And then, the clients I work with every day just all feeling so alone in their experiences that are really shared experiences. And I really just wanted to promote, that real connection that people have without knowing they have that connection.
Chelsea, you've done it beautifully. The book is called Square Me, Round World, Stories of Growing Up in a World Not Built for You. Thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing the story of how this book came to be on the Happy Families podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, we talk to another author of another fantastic book for neurodivergent kids. It's called Wonderfully Wired. Stacey Lucas is the author of another book for neurodivergent people, or about neurodivergent people. It's called Wonderfully Wired, 100 Inspiring Stories of Neurodivergent People Who Changed the World. Stacey, tell us about the book.
Okay, so the book contains 100 stories about neurodivergent individuals. So it includes ADHD, autism. It also has Tourette's and dyslexia. And they're just inspiring stories about things that have achieved in their lives, despite maybe having challenges as well, particularly when they were younger at school growing up.
Okay, so a book that's really looking at people who are neurodivergent and telling their stories. I got the sense that it was kind of like those, and I don't know if this inspired or not, tell me if I'm wrong, but those books, I can't remember what they're called, like Rebel Girls, and there's it's that kind of thing?
That was my inspiration because I was familiar with those books, but I noticed that they really didn't contain many neurodivergent people. And so that was the idea as well behind it.
Yeah, okay. So I can imagine that a lot of people who are raising kids with ADHD, kids that have level 1, level 2, even level 3 autism, or kids who have any kind of neurological or psychological challenges or additional needs would look at this and say, I kind of like the idea of this, but who was a big surprise to you? Who would you never have even thought was neurodivergent until you did the research and started to write the book?
Oh, there's so many. Like Richard Branson is one. I had no idea. He's so successful.
He's done okay, hasn't he? I mean, the ADHD hasn't stopped him.
It's unbelievable. And he's dyslexic. So he's got 2 things and he's achieved extraordinary things. And it was around the time that Elon Musk came out and announced that he had autism. And that was surprising. Like, these are huge names that achieved extraordinary things, and yet they had a neurodivergence, and also associated with that when they were young, some really big challenges, particularly at school. I mean, Richard Branson was told that he was hopeless at school and that he was never going to be able to achieve anything. And yet he's gone on to prove those teachers wrong. A lot of children that are neurodivergent find school difficult, and they'd be able to relate to a lot of the stories in the book because these 100 people often also struggle during schooling as well.
Yeah. How important is representation, do you think, when you look at the people around you who have different diagnoses and challenges, for them to be able to see these stories? What does that do for them?
Well, it makes them feel that they're not alone, firstly. Secondly, it gives them the sense of feeling that everything will be okay. I might be having some challenges at the moment, but look at these people and what they were able to achieve in their lives. So maybe I'll be able to do something like that too. That's very important.
The Rebel Girls books have absolutely blown up. They were worldwide phenomenons. Yeah. They were so successful. What's the initial feedback been for Wonderfully Wired?
Really, so far it's been amazing. I've had really positive feedback from parents of neurodivergent children who said that they even benefit from the book because it gave them a sense of hope and for their child. Also, health professionals working with neurodivergent children have really enjoyed it. Teachers, schools. So far it's been very positive.
Congratulations, Stacey. Stacey Lucas is the author of the book Wonderfully Wired. It's basically brief bios of 100 people from all around the world, males, females, representation right across the board, and something that can give your kids hope. Even if things are hard right now, they don't necessarily have to stay hard for the rest of their lives. Stacey, so glad you jumped onto the podcast with me to share this today. Really, really wish you the very best with Wonderfully Wired. Hope it goes well for you.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Stacey Lucas is the author of Wonderfully Wired. We'll link to it in our show notes. You can Google, Amazon, whatever it is, go wherever you need to buy the book. If you're dealing with any of those challenges that come with raising neurodivergent kids, I think that you're going to find it inspirational, hopeful, and provide the kids with a sense of representation that they can grow up to feel like life is worth living and make a contribution and to do well, even if they're not feeling particularly competent right now. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon for Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about making your family happier, check the show notes for Wonderfully Wired or visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.